As we saw in the last talk, we are to be servants, and we have to see Our Lady as a mother, as a person, as a she who has a heart. And the heart of the church is the Eucharist. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the Eucharist and the Blessed Mother. But I want to begin by saying that we cannot understand the Eucharist unless we understand love. In his encyclical, Deus Caritas Es, who remembers that encyclical? That was the first one of Pope Benedict, unexpected one. He told us, that was in January 26, 2006, he said that God has desired to reveal to us the novelty, I love that word, the novelty of love that led God to assume a human face, a human heart, to assume flesh and blood, a whole human being. So therefore, he was calling us to contemplate that novelty. I mean, we're kind of used to it, seeing the Eucharist. Brothers and sisters, I want to invite you that every time you come to Mass or you come to adore the Lord in the Eucharist, you come as if it was the first time. And for you, priest, which I love very much, priest, I love you very much, and thank you, because without you, we don't have the Eucharist. We don't have the sacrament. So let's give a round of applause to the priest. Of course, that includes the bishop, because before being a bishop, he is a priest. But, you know, St. John Vianney said that he wanted to celebrate every Mass as if it was his first Mass and his last Mass. So I invite you, priests, to celebrate it that way, and I assure you the faithful will experience that love in your heart. So the Eucharist reveals the novelty of God's love. I'm not going to have the time to explain why, the fullness of the why, but I'm going to try to do it. The Eucharist is the revelation of Christ's love for humanity, and is the understanding of our dignity, and you will understand why. Understanding of our dignity and our true greatness. In the Eucharist, all the thirst of our hearts can be quenched. All the wounds of our hearts can be healed. All that needs to be restored in humanity can be restored. All our struggles, confusions, darkness, anguish, shadows, lack of finding meaning in our life, disorientations of the human heart, all that we find in the world today can find a light when we are before the Eucharist. The Eucharist is God's love made present. John Paul II told us in his first encyclical, and I'm going to ask if you know which was his first encyclical, because I don't want you not to know it before the bishop. Redemptoris hominis. And he said in number 10 something that has really stuck in my heart forever. He said, men, including women, cannot live without love. Say it to yourself. I cannot live without love. I become incomprehensible to myself. Why am I incomprehensible to myself when I close my heart to love? Because I was created to love. I was created out of love. I was created to love, to know love, and to give love. I do not understand my life unless I experience love. That's why we have a lot of disorientation in humanity today, because they're not finding love in their families or in their surroundings. If we don't encounter love, if we don't experience love, if we don't make it our own, we do not know who we are. So love is totally the foundation of our identity. So Jesus Christ, the Redeemer, in his face reveals the fullness of who we are. When people say, should we have devotion to the face of Christ? I say, not devotion, beyond devotion. We should be contemplating the face of Christ, because when I see God becoming man, I understand who I am. I am so important for God that he chose to become man, to become one of us in all things, except in what? In sin. Why not in sin? Because God cannot sin, but also because sin is not the truth about the human person. Sin came after we were created. Sin was the choice of disobedience to the Father, to distrust to the Father. Without love, we can destroy ourselves. And we're seeing it, isn't it? We're seeing a society that is lacking love. We're seeing a society that is self-destroying. Our civilization is in ruins. People don't want to see it. Well, we cannot cover the sun with one finger, isn't it? Our civilization is in ruins at all levels. And that reminds me of the vision of Sister Lucia, the third visionary of Fatima, when he described the vision, not the words, but the vision that she had in the third secret. She said the Pope is walking, climbing a mountain among ruins, the ruins of cities. What does that mean? Is it only physical ruins like the terrible invasion we're seeing in Ukraine? No, it's also the ruins, the moral ruins that we're seeing in our society. Why is this difficult? Because when a civilization, when a culture is in ruins, when we're not founded and rooted in faith and in morals, what happens is, brothers and sisters, that we have a broken culture. And we are called to build a culture of love. I don't know how many times Jean Paul said it from the very beginning of his pontificate. Civilization of love, the culture of love and life. Why? Because he knew we were heading to destruction. Why is it so important to build the culture of love? Because the culture is a home. I'm Nicaraguan, even though I came out of Nicaragua when I was very young. So I don't have a lot of Nicaraguan culture because neither my father or my mother were Nicaraguan. But wherever you are from, the culture that you live in affects you and leads you into having principles and values. So when we have a culture that doesn't have principles and values, what's going to happen to you? You're going to grow up without principles and values, without traditions. Brothers and sisters, the greatest sign of love, we are in Lent. The greatest sign of love that Jesus wanted to give us, I know everything in his life is love. The incarnation is a choice of love. Redemption is a choice of love. Saving people from sin is a work of love. Healing the blind, the paralyzed man, healing the bleeding women, that's a sign of his love. But the greatest sign of his love was the cross. But that was not enough, because his love had no limits. And because love is supposed to have no limits. Why do I say it has no limits? Because I love the prayer of John 17. If I ever preach to the priest, that will be a whole talk. John 17. But, I'm not going to go into the whole prayer because I don't have much time. But he said, Father, can you imagine Jesus praying? We have to go into the Gospels, kind of inside the Gospel, like a movie. You have to be part of the movie. Father, when I was with them, this is suffering. This is his last prayer to the Father. When I was with them, I protected them. Why? Because a father is a custodian. Priests, you're custodians of the mother and the child. When I was with them, I protected them. I gave them your name. I spoke about you, and I guarded them. I'm sure those words were also said by Saint Joseph. Father, they are your gift to me. That's amazing to me. That's love, brothers and sisters. This is after the supper, the Last Supper. When it was the darkest hour, betrayal, denial, somewhere, I don't know where. Thinking about everything else, the other one asked him, so we know, the whole reality of human sin. And he said, they are your gift to me. And wherever I am, I want them to be with me. So let's try to change a little bit. Now, not changing the prayer. Wherever they are, I want to be with them. And that's why, brothers and sisters, the end of the expression of his love is not the cross. The expression of his love continues until the end of time in the Eucharist. Thank God I'm not Jesus. Because after everything I went through in heaven, when it's the time of the ascension, I said, bye. Remember, you have to go and proclaim the gospel. Bye. He didn't say that. I will be with you until the end of times. How is he with us until the end of times? Through the Eucharist and in the Eucharist. Saint Faustina, one day she was praying. The Lord usually appeared to her when she was before the Blessed Sacrament, not only in her cell. And she was wondering, why the Eucharist? And Jesus said to her, love has brought me here. Speaking of the altar, and love will keep me always in the tabernacle. It's love. The Eucharist is a school of love. You want to learn how to love? You want to learn how to be a doctor? What do you need to do? You got to go to university, no? And receive good teaching from good professors. How do you learn to love? Sit at the school of the Eucharist. Fill your parishes with Eucharistic adoration, and you will have good servants, good sons and daughters of the church, faithful daughters of the church, good disciples and missionaries. In his last encyclical, which he was dedicated to the Eucharist, John Paul died in the year of the Eucharist. He said, what was the name of the encyclical? Ecclesia de Eucharistia. Like the church lives of the Eucharist. So if the church lives of the Eucharist, you and I, we live of the Eucharist. Brothers and sisters, last year, no, not last year, I have lost count of years with the pandemic. I don't know why. I don't know if it happened to you. I was so busy during the pandemic that I don't even know all the things that I did. But I remember 2 weeks before the pandemic, there was a poll and statistics from the UCCB that 70%, that's a lot, 70% of Catholics did not believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. That's alarming. That means we have become Protestants. We don't believe in the presence of Christ. What makes us different? 70%. And I remember that I said that, I said, Lord, what are you going to do to make us long for the Eucharist? Why did I say that? 2 weeks after we had the pandemic, the lockdowns, the churches were closed. We didn't have that because we have our chapel and we have our priests. But I remember the sick people, we asked them to come and make lines and we would give them the Eucharist. People were crying because they didn't have the Eucharist. And I said, well, maybe that's what we needed. We need not to get used to the gift and the treasure of the church. The greatest treasure of the church is not the beautiful tabernacles, even though I love beautiful tabernacles. It's not the beautiful statues, even though we love beautiful statues. The greatest treasure of the church is the Eucharist. And let's give it a round of applause. The Eucharist speaks about love, about self-donation. You know, think about it, brothers and sisters. He became man. God became man. And then God became the Eucharist, hidden in the species of bread and blood and wine, for us to receive him, for us to have a strength in the struggles of life, for us to have wisdom when things are confusing, for us to be faithful to our vocation, for us to not be confused in the errors of our time. To love the Eucharist is our gift, but it's also our task. We must proclaim the greatness of the Eucharist, the splendor of the Eucharist. Priests, the way you celebrate the Eucharist is the way we're going to accompany you. That's the way we're going to love the Eucharist. But there is someone that can teach us to love the Eucharist. Of course, I'm skipping a lot of pages. Because the Eucharist is the precious gift of the Sacred Heart, and it needs to be discovered as such. But there is someone who can teach us to build the Eucharistic culture. That was the last petition of John Paul. We need to build a Eucharistic culture. Equals a culture of love. The one that can teach us the centrality of the Eucharist and how to love the Eucharist is the Blessed Mother. John Paul, in the letter of the Rosary, says, who can teach us better than Our Lady to know Christ in the Eucharist? To enter in the school of Mary is to put ourselves in living communion with the heart of Jesus through the heart of the Mother. Christ is the supreme teacher, said John Paul, the revealer and the one revealed. We need to learn about Christ, but that is not enough. We learn a lot about Christ, some of us. We need to learn Christ himself, how he is, how he thinks, how he feels, how he acts, how he responds. In this regard, said John Paul, who can have any better teacher than Mary? Because she never took his eyes off him. Isn't that beautiful? A lady lived with his eyes fixed on Christ. And that's why he said, Mary's heart, in her heart, we learn to contemplate the mysteries of the Eucharist. And the Christian people, said John Paul, must sit at the school of Mary to contemplate the beauty of the face of Christ and the depth of his love in his heart. The contemplation of Christ has an incomparable, this is important, highlight it, incomparable model of Christ. Mary is the model that is incomparable in the contemplation of Christ. So we need to learn to gaze at Jesus in the Eucharist with somebody's eyes, with the eyes of his mother. Mary lived with her eyes fixed on Christ from the very beginning. I'm going to go fast. Follow me. We must learn to gaze with her eyes. When at the moment of the Annunciation, she conceived him by the power of the Holy Spirit, and she had Jesus in her womb. And she had to develop an interior gaze to be looking. Mothers, you understand what I'm talking about? That you begin to imagine how the child is going to be? That's what Our Lady was already contemplating. How many times maybe we can see Our Lady praying, not to her womb, praying to the one that was in the greatest tabernacle of the world, which is her womb. For 9 months, she adored Christ among men in her womb. And then when she visited Elizabeth, carrying Jesus within her. And in reality, in the visitation, Our Lady is anticipating the church Eucharistic mission. She's bringing Christ to humanity. Every time a priest or an extraordinary Eucharistic minister is giving Christ or taking it to a sick person, you are doing a visitation. You're continuing the visitation of Our Lady. She entered and saw what Jesus did for the first time. And the baby, St. John the Baptist, the cousin of Jesus, leapt of joy. Do we leap of joy when we receive Jesus? Just by his presence, not even receiving him, he leapt of joy. When she gave birth to him in Bethlehem. Can we imagine? And this is not romantic. I'm not a romantic in that sense. This is reality. Can you imagine Our Lady looking at Jesus when she gave birth to him, to that little baby in Bethlehem? How did she gaze at Jesus? With full adoration, with wonder, taking into his hand, this is God-made man, born from my immaculate and virginal womb. Attention, virginal womb, before, during, and after, okay? Adoration, so much adoration that when the shepherds and the magi went in, what did they do? They prostrated before the child. What did they prostrate before the child? Because that's how they saw Our Lady and St. Joseph. We must learn to gaze at Jesus with the eyes of our mother. And in the presentation, when a beautiful exclamation of Simon, but at the same time, a difficult prophecy, she looked at him in the deep silence before the mystery of that child who was to be a sign of contradiction. And then, in the finding in the temple, she saw him with a penetrating gaze, you know, like mothers can see. What did you do this? You know? Trying to understand what was Jesus doing. And then, in Cana, let's try to imagine the gaze between Jesus and Our Lady. Our Lady's gaze is so acute and profound that she's capable of perceiving the hidden feelings and anticipating the decisions of Christ's heart. That's why she said, go and get water, 6 jars of water to the rim. Heavy, a lot of water. She anticipated what Christ was going to do. And at the cross, at the foot of the cross, a gaze of sorrow like no sorrow in humanity can ever be imitated. But not only a gaze of sorrow, the gaze of a mother giving birth Because at the same time that her son was dying, he was giving birth to the church. And she was the one that her heart was pierced mystically, receiving a new maternity. And at the time of the resurrection, wow, I wish I could see it. When you go to the Holy Sepulchre, there's the Chapel of the Blessed Sacrament. That's where Jesus appeared to his mother. Can you imagine? He just saw her son dead, wounded, destroyed, disfigured, and suddenly glorified. Her gaze was radiant of joy of the resurrection because love has conquered, because life had conquered death, and love had conquered sin. And on the day of Pentecost, we're going to speak tomorrow a lot about Pentecost, but in the day of Pentecost, her gaze was filled with fire, ardent with gaze at the power of the Holy Spirit coming upon the apostles who really needed it. And how did she get gaze to the Eucharist? How did she get to the Eucharist? We don't think about that. I mean, the one that gave birth to Jesus, the one that held him, the one that nourished him, that taught him how to pray, how to walk, the one that was at the foot of the cross, that saw him resurrected. Now he had to, like you and me, relate to her son in the sacrament of the Eucharist, given by the apostles. Can you imagine when Peter, I'm going to get the three that Jesus always got, but that doesn't mean. James, Peter, and John said, "Behold, this is the body and blood of your son." Can you imagine what she felt? And receiving Jesus just the way that we do. According to John Paul, and according to me, which with a big difference. The apostles learned how to deal with the Eucharist from Our Lady. Because remember when he was born, she wrapped him in clothing, and she gave him a nice manger with the help of St. Joseph. Well, she had to teach the apostles, well, you have to take care of the Eucharist. You know, this is the body and blood of the Lord. This is his real presence. So maybe she did the first linens. That's why I love linens in the altars. Because that's the clothing that we need to put, because the Jesus body is going to be there. Can you imagine what it meant to teach the apostles and the first Christians? You have to love him. This is Jesus himself. Even if you have to die, protect him. And that's why we have so many martyrs of the Eucharist at the beginning of the church and even until recently. Martyrs of the church. Are we willing to give our lives to defend the church, to defend the Eucharist? Are we willing to stand up when they come to break, I think it was last week, that they broke a tabernacle and they threw all the consecrated host? What are we going to do about it? We need to defend the Eucharist because it's Jesus himself. And in heaven, Our Lady's looking, gazing at the Trinity. Oh my God, I cannot understand that one. Gazing at the Trinity as the beloved daughter of the Father, as the mother of the Son, as the spouse of the Holy Spirit. All the relationships of a woman. She's in relationship with the Holy Trinity. May our Blessed Mother lead us to her Son, to her Eucharistic Son. And that's what John Paul prayed in Poland, in Częstochowa. I pray, he says, that Our Lady may teach us to love her Son in the Eucharist. She's the most perfect teacher of that love, which enables us to be united in the deepest way to Christ in the mystery of the Eucharistic presence. Mary, he begged, please lead us to the Eucharist, because no one like you has a direct and heartfelt relationship with your Son in the Eucharist. Teach us to gaze at him and teach us to understand the mystery of love enclosed in every consecrated host. God bless you.
Thank you, Mother. You probably remember from your schedules, and the next thing we'll follow is the Liturgy of the Holy Eucharist. So I invite the priests to please go and get vested. And when you are ready, please come and take your seats here in a reserved spot. That means that some of the folks, you need to move a little bit, okay? And so that will be great. Also a reminder, if you really have to go to bathroom, you go. Otherwise, please remain in a chapel, and we'll get ready, vested, and we'll be back to celebrate the Mass. Reminder, of course, please be respectful to the space, to the sacredness of this place. Please remember that.